Aloha nerds, and welcome back to the Salwog's Why It's Great Gut Reaction, where I watch things and react from the gut. I am Matthew Salanoa. The Salwog is my online personality, which it's all the nerdy film talk in me that drives my family crazy. And since I don't have anyone to really talk to about it without driving them mad as well, I've decided to put this madness on the internet. I am a director of the award-winning film 007, I Only Need One. I've been a filmmaker for over 17 years, and my whole podcast, why I call it Why It's Great in the first place, is all about celebrating the filmmaking of movies, even sometimes movies that I don't necessarily like, but I think if there's something worth talking about, I'm going to talk about this movie. Like Swiss Army Man. I was not crazy about that movie, but it was incredibly well made, and so that review exists. But here we are, and I've seen the film Klaus. Klaus is directed by Sergio Pablos. It's a Netflix film. You can find it on Netflix right now. It is the season to be merry. And Klaus stars Jason Schwartzman as Jesper, a postman. It stars J.K. Simmons. J. Jonah Jameson, you're fired. It stars J.K. Simmons as Klaus, the titular character, and also Rashida Jones, who's a teacher in the small, creepy, eerie town of Schmierensburg. So, for those of you who've never heard of Klaus, let me give you the little rundown here. This is the origin story of the legend of Santa Claus. But there's no magic in this story, not the obvious kind anyway. There's subtle hints of magic, but it's how a couple of people, regular human beings, set out on a mission to make children happy in a very sad town. The town of Schmierensburg is beleaguered by two warring families, or clans, whatever it may be. They've been warring for so long, for so many centuries, that at this point the town's very desolate. The only thing people eat are fish because people don't take care of themselves or the land anymore. All they care about is going to war with each other at the slightest, slight, at the slightest wrong look, at the wrong noise. Or there's literally a town bell that if you ring it, the fighting begins. So it's a really heartwarming movie. How the whole Santa Claus legend happens. It happens very naturally, and in this movie there's so many things that are so, how do I say, they're wrong things done right, or something like that. I don't want to spoil the movie for those of you who haven't seen it. This is very, as much as I may make it sound kind of violent and scary, I like to think of this movie as kind of it was my friend who showed it to me. The Amazing Z. She was telling me it's a lot like The Emperor's New Groove. And I felt like, yeah, it is a bit like The Emperor's New Groove. I feel like it's the anti-Nightmare Before Christmas, where Nightmare Before Christmas is really Tim Burton's own defined style, and it's very dark. It's deliberately a dark, scary story. But Klaus, it's so beautiful to look at. If you haven't seen this movie, Klaus literally looks like a storybook that you would open up and read your child, especially around the time of Christmas. It's a Christmas book, and it's a town draped in snow. So perfect for the conditions of the origin of Santa Claus. But really, I was really, I wasn't affected by the movie as much. The whole first 10 minutes was cute and fun, but I really felt like I was watching like some kind of weird Bill Murray movie where I swear there's a movie where Bill Murray's always playing the kind of lazy, laid back guy you wouldn't trust with a stapler. You know what I mean? And that's what Klaus kind of is. He's part of this academy of postmen that's kind of run like the military, where it's military-style training of postmen where they're running and doing obstacle courses, and they have to put mail in the correct slots, But Jesper, sorry if I said his name wrong. Jason Schwartzman plays the main character, Jesper, who's a very lazy postman. And his laziness, ironically, gets him a job, where his father is the one who runs this place, and he's so disappointed in his son's lack of enthusiasm to train and be there with the rest of the guys. Instead of kicking him out, he gives them a job in the worst place possible, the town of Schmierensburg, and says, you cannot come back until you've been there for a year and gotten through 6,000 pieces of letters. Then you'll have proven that you can come back and have your life, and you don't have to be in the academy anymore and all that stuff. But yeah, Jesper. But like I said, so the first 10 minutes, I wouldn't say it screams that style that got me, but as soon as Jesper shows up in Schmierensburg, even though it's very creepy looking, that's when the beginning of the storybook appearance occurs. Like literally the first shot of the boat coming through the fog and seeing this very creepy town. As much as it is creepy, it's still awe-inspiring and beautiful. There's something about it. It kind of feels like the ruins of a once beautiful place. And what's more fairy tale like and storybook like than that? And, the amazing thing is when we get him in the town and he's trying to do his job, you see these people going at it and going to war. But, the art style still maintains that storybook look. And so I'm caught between, God, the horrific violence of people trying to beat each other and kill each other, mixed with the fact that it just looks like an adorable, cute book about, little people learning about Christmas. It's stunning. It's really stunning, the look of this movie. And I did watch a little bit of an interview. I watched a couple interviews to prep for this review, and I will link them all below. But my favorite interview so far, I haven't finished it, but I just wanted to warm up and remind myself, because it's been a couple days since I watched the movie. The latest interview, let me get that name. The latest interview I was watching was very good. Double Toasted. So Double Toasted is a podcast where the host, I guess he interviews filmmakers. The original vision for this podcast was that I would interview filmmakers, but I won't get into it today, but I did not end up going that way, and it just became kind of a standard review podcast. But Double Toasted hosts his homework and is talking to the director, and they talk about him wanting that very specific look, and he wanted this movie to be two-dimensional. And I was very surprised by that, because the movie is so beautiful. The lighting, like I said, it really looks like a storybook. And you got characters moving 360 degrees and doing things that feels like a 3D movie with a 2D animation style, to the point where there's points in the movie where I'm screaming at my friend, hey, this is 3D, this is 3D. I thought it was 2D, but it's 3D. And yet, actually, what was cool about the interview was that Sergio Pablos talked about how it is 2D, but they reached out to a company in France that does animation, and not only that, but the production designer, for those of you who don't know what that is, that's the person who's essentially in charge of the physical look of a movie. A director may ask for things and have references, but the production designer actually has to design it and make it possible. But the production designer of this movie, and you may not think that an animated movie needs it, but it's all the look of the movie. That's still a job. It doesn't matter that it's not physical. What matters is that the job is you're defining the look, meaning what the locations look like, what the costumes look like. You see, bad movies, those things are not cohesive, and they may be the director's fault or not. Good or great movies, like this one, there's a really consistent look between the production design and the costumes. Whereas you look at you look at the first Star Wars, and it's really no fault of the first Star Wars. The things that they needed did not exist yet. But a lot of the aliens were just regular creature heads and weird things, from horror movies or other things. versus the later Star Wars movies, and especially the prequels, where George Lucas really had resources. The later the movies became, the greater the technology was, the more the production designers really had the ability to make anything. But that's one example of where you low budget, you can't make as much, and so you kind of just have to roll with what you got. And the bigger budget, you can make anything you want. So what's beautiful about Klaus is that, again, from the buildings to the costumes to the character design to the shadow underneath the nose, there's this completely consistent storybook look where it truly feels like a storybook that's moving. And I think that was just so elegantly accomplished that the technical aspect alone is worth watching the movie for. But as the director said, the most important thing before the technique is the story. What's the story? How does the technique inform that story or support that story? That is always what must matter first for storytellers, and especially in the case of film where you're in charge of various crew members. You really got to have a sense of what's the story, what's needed to tell that story. Storytelling has requirements, and as a director, you have to understand what those requirements are to effectively tell a story. This is something that I learned from studying many great filmmakers, including Paul Verhoeven and Sam Raimi. I don't know if you can tell, that's a Doc Ock poster from Spider-Man 2, even Deadpool. But I've studied many great directors, and always the most important thing is how well you tell the story and what is the story. And so it was really everything I was picking up from the movie. I was really happy to hear the director say those words in this interview on Double Toasted, where he was like, the story comes before the technique. If the story doesn't support a 2D animation movie, then there's no real reason to go that way. But he felt that the origin of Santa Claus being a bit of a nostalgic story should have a nostalgic approach to it. And yet they pushed the envelope with what 2D animation could be, because I still, until this interview that I watched, I still believe this movie was partially 3D or somehow a 2D overlay of 3D animation, which I think I've seen before. I thought for sure, like, no, dude, this is no way this is 2D. But to hear him confirm that and actually explain that 2D animation, it's still something that could be pushed, and this is something that when I was going to film school was talked about. When movies went from silent film to the talkies, there was a lot of frustration from filmmakers saying, hey, we haven't perfected film yet. Like what the camera can do is it's not even where it can be. Why are we adding audio to it? And now we've got to deal with audio, and it's going to be now we're going to have to get through this crap. And that's kind of what was being reflected from the director, who's worked on a lot of Disney stuff. He's worked on a bunch of movies, but his feeling too was that once upon a time, Disney cared about innovation and pushing the technology, and that 2D animation was never done. It was just that 3D was such an explosive new thing, it kind of just took over. But 2D animation was never done evolving and growing and becoming something better and newer than what it could be. And so it was very cool watching this interview, and they had some clips, some footage of the production designers, like lighting test where there's a 360-degree turn on Jesper, the main character. But it's all 2D animation, and the production designer who did it essentially said, it's all lighting. If you understand how lighting works and you get people who understand how lighting works, you can make this type of image and make this happen. Because even the director was like, how are you doing this? This must be 3D. So yeah, the beautiful visuals by themselves are worth watching, but it really is an exceptional movie. I think Klaus does a great job of being very touching, while also being very, how how do I say the word? What's the word for what this movie does? Because the violence is so heinous in this movie, yet it's still very cartoon like. But the violence is so heinous, it's almost corrupt. You know what I mean? I'm like, this would never be allowed at Disney. And I think if it was at DreamWorks, they would probably want it to push it further and make it even more disgusting than it needs to be, just because they like to push the limit. They like to push the edge. What I like about this movie is it kind of meets beautifully in the middle of a Disney or a DreamWorks, and it's kind of its own perfect movie for what it's trying to be. And again, as we learn why Klaus, the titular character played by J.K. Simmons, why is he this scary woodsman? Why is he living alone in the woods? And what is his motivation when Jesper's trying to give himself the job? He can't leave unless he gets mail and gets it around the town. And yet, the town has not had mail sent or delivered for hundreds of years because of all the fighting. So Jesper tries to, a little kid at the top of a house drops a piece of paper that lands outside the gates of the house, and he asks for Jesper to pick it up and give it back to him. But Jesper's like, I'm a mailman, so I can't give it back to you, but I could mail it back to you if you give me a penny. I'll stamp it, because he needs 6,000 stamps to prove that he's done his job. So that it's the beginning of Jesper doing very questionable things, very corrupt things, or seemingly corrupt things. Or if you're just an adult who's been around, the way that what he does is to sell mail. It's so questionable and creepy at times. Like he's the minute the minute Jesper starts hustling to get mail, it's just, he does so much crazy stuff. I don't want to spoil it because you got to watch it. But yeah, so how Jesper meets up with Klaus and how they ended up teaming up to give presents to kids, and how we learn really Klaus's story, because we're learning about Klaus slowly in little pieces across the movie. And it's just a wonderful, touching story. So for those of you who haven't seen Klaus, I really highly recommend it. Watch it with your kids. I think it's totally appropriate for children, even though there's a lot of heinous violence. It's all very much in the spirit of Emperor's New Groove or Looney Tunes, early Looney Tunes. There's literally a fight scene where the two clans come at each other for the first time, and Jesper's in the middle, and two of them are fighting over Jesper and stretching it, and they literally stretch him out like a Looney Tunes, and he snaps back like a rubber band. I love this movie, and when we get to the end, it's just very heartwarming. It's just when things get so bad in the town, before the story starts to become the magical origin of Santa Claus, you just don't expect that by the end of this movie, your heart will be warmed, and you're gonna feel like, I just watched a really wonderful Christmas movie. That was my experience watching this movie, and this is something that my friend was pushing, because we both went to film school together, but before we met at film school, she went to animation school, so she really knows what she's talking about when she sees an animated picture and says this is a good picture. But I did not expect. I was like, and how could I not expect it? But I did not expect this movie to be as great as it was. Truly a wonderful piece of film. So spoiler free, go check it out. And I don't know what I'm going to talk about in the spoilers, but I'm going to talk about some spoilers next. And if you have seen the movie, I would love your comments on your favorite scene or your favorite questionable thing that Jesper does. So here we go into spoilers. And if you have not watched the movie, please watch it first. Okay? I'm telling you, it's worth it. It's worth it to be surprised. Okay? Thank you very much. Spoiler time! Where movies go to get ruined. Ah, that's scary. I'm not going to make that face again. I'll try not to. Bye. Okay, spoilers. Spoiler territory for Klaus. Oh man, where do I start with this movie? First of all, I didn't want to say this because I didn't want to say this in the spoiler-free section because this is probably one of my favorite early moments. After Klaus has been rubber band, after Jesper has been rubber band, and he starts hustling to get mail to happen, and he starts getting around the town, literally knocking on every single door. One of my favorite moments is he's talking to, I guess, the original post, or no, he's really the boatman, which that by itself, it kind of gives suggestions of like the ferryman Sharon who gets you from the world of the living to Hades, the world of the dead, which is very much the visual presentation. But one of my favorite moments is right up front. I'm just talking about favorite stuff. One of my favorite moments is it's in the background. After narrowly dodging death many, many times in this town, Jesper is talking to Norm Macdonald's character. And in the background, we see this split hill with two houses, and one house opens up a flap and a little cannon comes out and blasts the other house. I had to rewind twice because I was like, am I really seeing this right now? Did this just happen? It was one of the funniest gags in this thing. And another thing is that there's totally some serial killer family in this town, because every time Jesper crosses a certain alleyway, there's always two people carrying a dead body from one house to the other. I'm like, what are you guys do? Who are you killing? What's going on? So this town has so many secrets, and I'm glad no one explained it. I'm like, this is a kid's movie. I don't want the explanation, but the visual is shocking and horrible enough. Well, okay, so favorite things. Favorite things. Before we even get to Klaus, it's just Jesper's little adventure. I like how this movie's told in these chapters. Where first we get, the lazy Jesper, and then we get the introduction to the town, and all the madness therein. But once, after meeting Klaus and getting, oh man, the meeting of Klaus. When Klaus, see what I like, how I love how Klaus gets pulled into this story, is that there's this little flap of the map of the town that's hanging over, and Jesper peels it back and realizes, oh, there's one more house I haven't been to, and he goes there, and there's the creepy woodsman Klaus, and he has that piece of paper from the little boy, and we don't know what's on it until Klaus finds it, and Klaus picks it up and sees a picture of the house that the little boy is in, and at the top of the house is just a sad face. And it just tells you a lot, you know what I mean? Not that I have kids, but I've been helping taking care of some kids in my 30s now. And, it's amazing how little kids communicate verbally, you know what I mean? They talk a lot, but they don't talk about the internal stuff, at least boys, you know what I mean? And maybe because we train them that way, I don't know, but just to see that, it really speaks volumes for what the kid is experiencing. Like, this town has been at war so long that Rashida Jones, wonderful, she's the only teacher at a school that has no students in it. So all she does is fish and cut and cook fish and sell that to make money. And she's trying to get enough sold to leave the town. So she's just like Jesper, she's trying to get out, but she's been at it much longer than he has. So it's but anyways, the fact that this picture just had this frowny face, it was very impactful. You know what I mean? Because although we're seeing the ridiculous horror of what these townspeople are doing to each other, like with the cannon blowing up the other house, I was just like, it's like a pirate ship on land. Like, wow. Um, but so yeah, that picture by itself just spoke volumes about what the children are really experiencing. Even though we're seeing them have fun and be bullies or whatever, or be at war with each other, and it's kind of presented in a very fun way, that image showed a lot about, hey, there's an unspoken pain here that all this carnage is actually causing. And because it's only through Klaus that we actually see what's on the picture, it says a lot that that's what motivates Klaus to get involved and to go find Jesper and say, take me to this house. And it's one of our great here's a great Klaus moment. It's one of our great hints at what the story is going to be. Because going into the movie, I'm like, Klaus, okay, there's a Santa Clausness to that name, but it's not overtly Santa Clausy. And nothing in the movie, because I just didn't know, and my friend didn't tell me what the movie was about, which I enjoyed. I'm glad I didn't know. But just the fact that the hint is in the name, and yet we don't really know. The fact that the first time they interact with each other is over this picture, and Klaus tells Jesper to bring him to that house and gives him a package to give to the kid. And the first hint that tells us for sure that this is a Santa Claus story is that Klaus kicks Jesper in the ass, and cartoon style Jesper flies all the way up and falls straight through the chimney. It was such a almost magical kind of thing. And yeah, who knows? This guy's a big woodsman. He's also a craftsman. He can probably tell that, this skinny little guy can fit in that chimney. But essentially, yeah, becomes the first Christmas delivery. But that was one of those beautiful little moments that I also love. So there's a favorite Klaus moment, or really it's a favorite town moment. I know the favorite Jesper moment with the town, with the cannon in the house. But also a little favorite Klaus moment because, oh, this is a Santa Claus story. That was the first hint that the story's going to go in that direction. And it just leads to one of my real favorite Jesper moments in the movie, which is after the kid wakes up and discovers his picture has been returned to him with a gift, and it's this beautiful frog robot thing that just bounces around the house, and it gives the kid so much joy. And it's the first moment in the movie where there's actually joy in this town. Even the beginning of the movie doesn't have any joy because it's just this kind of military training style version of postmen learning how to be postmen. There's no real joy in this movie until that kid opens the toy. And even that, watching that frog bounce around, it just brought me right back to me being a kid. And one of my first favorite toys ever was the Batman Forever Batmobile, which lights up when you press the button in the back. And the joy of oh, look at this magical thing. Look at this magical thing that I can play with. It just really brought me right back to that. Yeah. So the movie is it has touchstones for, classic animation, but also has personal touchstones as well. That first present that captures your imagination as a kid, wow, this can exist. This is a thing that I didn't know that I wanted, but someone else figured out I might like, and I love it. And it was just such a wonderful piece of animation. because it was dark and it was only lit by like a single candlelight, and so you're just seeing this frog bounce around into the distance and then bounce back, and the kid chasing it with this huge smile on his face, and it's just that first heartwarming glimpse of where the movie's going to go. So there again, one of my first favorite moments in the movie, Klaus related or Christmas related, right there. Followed by the kid. The kid has gone around and told people, "Hey, if you send mail, you get a toy." And so three kids run up to Jesper, who's at the postman's office, and they said, "Hey, we heard if you mail something that you can get a toy." And then that's when the light bulb hits Jesper. It's like, oh, here's my way out of this town. And we get this creepy montage of Jesper walking around to kids in a trench coat. You know what I mean? Like, he looks like he's gonna open up his trench coat and like want to buy some watches, kid? Do you want to buy some watches? You know what I mean? It's so creepy and wrong. You know what I mean? All the association of things that, again, if you've grown up, especially in the last 20 or 30 years, and you know these images from movies of creepy people. But to see Jesper, our main character, doing that so that he can get out of the town, it was just like, oh, I don't know how to feel about you, Jesper. This is messed up, man. But at the same time, it's not messed up because he's not selling anything to the kids. Really, he's just trying to get mail to be circulated so that he can do his job and get out. But it's just the presentation of him doing it, like, hey, you want presents, kid? Like, so wrong, man. And yeah, and the town is full of wrong. Literally, there's people carrying around dead bodies on a normal basis. And then there's a creepy Wednesday family. The whole family looks like Wednesday, and there's a clear Wednesday type of girl with this creepy, they're completely silent and they're very creepy. The Addams family type of people, very creepy. You know, there's so many creepy things, but for some reason, the creepiest thing in this movie is Jesper hustling children for mail. And he doesn't even want Klaus to give him money. He just wants Klaus to do the return mail with the gifts because it makes the kids send more mail. So I don't get how that works for Klaus, but whatever. But it ends up inspiring in Klaus this desire to kind of do good, even though he has a very selfish reason to do it, which makes this movie kind of this weird combination of a kind of an origin to commercialism or an origin to the commercial aspect of Christmas, while also being a very sincere motivation to bring happiness to these kids. And there's the beautiful line in this movie that I think is important to notice for you storytellers. So I'm not just talking about my favorites here. I'm kind of interweaving how the story evolves and is well told. Klaus does not say much for the first 2/3 of the first half of the movie. Klaus doesn't say much, but slowly, as they deliver more toys, Klaus starts to reveal parts of himself, but what's magical is it's when Jesper is pitching how they could really make the town happier with these, or at least the children happier with these toys. That's our first little hint of magic when Klaus is watching him, and Klaus notices that the wind blows in a very particular way, and the leaves kind of circle around Jesper as if like a magical, important moment is happening. And it's almost as if Klaus is subtly in tune with some kind of magical essence in this forest or something. He just gives him a little bit of this mystical aspect. It's never stated, but it's just there, which to me makes it very real. I think there's a lot of magic in the world that's not apparent, but to those who are sensitive to it, You know, it's not really something you can talk about to most people, but you just see it happen and you feel it happen. You know, and I think that was a wonderful thing to see out of Klaus. But all of this inspiration and all of these deeds that they end up performing, even though really Jesper's just trying to get out of town, it ends up inspiring Klaus to open up. And one of the things he says is, one genuinely good deed or one genuine act of kindness inspires another, and which is kind of the message of the movie, because we have this town of people who are at war for a nonsense reason. At a certain point, it's really just if anything, to uphold the order of being disorderly. There's no real reason for these people to be at their throats, but they are. But slowly you see, as the kids get happier and the presents grow more plentiful, people start being a little more pleasant toward each other, and one act of kindness inspires another. There's a message to the movie trying to tell you what's a good human value, or what's a good way to go about life. I talk about this a lot with movies and shows that I review, because at the end of the day, the true storyteller understands the story is not just about someone who wants something. The story itself has a reason for existing. You know, Star Wars I bring up a lot because it has many kind of themes going on with it. But sort of the most important theme is the power of family, but not only the power of family, the power of forgiveness. That Luke Skywalker's forgiveness toward his father is the only thing that brings Darth Vader back to being Anakin Skywalker. And it would take someone who's personally valuable to him to give that forgiveness to him, because if you see the prequels, Anakin went so far to the dark side. The only person who could bring him back is his own son, the last piece of his dead wife, who he killed. That little bit of forgiveness. But when you look at even like Bruce Almighty, or that wonderful scene from Evan Almighty, where Evan's basically Noah and he's building an ark, and the wonderful scene where Morgan Freeman has a speech about, does God give you strength, or does he give you opportunities to be strong? And that sort of thematic resonance that does kind of hold that movie together. I don't think it's the best movie. I don't think either of the movies are great, but they have great gags. But Morgan Freeman's scenes in both movies are just magical. And so to have Klaus have this kind of heartwarming idea of, like, in the Evan Almighty's, it's a random act of kindness, right? But here it's like one act of kindness inspires another. It's sort of a suggestion that there's a way out of our woes, and it's kindness, toward each other, and letting go of baggage wherever it's possible, and that it's not just the society that needs it, but Klaus himself. The reason he's a scary loner woodsman is because, as we learn his story, he once had a wife, and it was his wife, and they wanted to have a lot of kids, and they started building toys for the children they would have, but unfortunately, eventually, they never had kids, and the wife died. And that's where the storage of toys comes from, that the woodsman is giving to all these kids. So his act of kindness has a story behind it as well. It's not just that he wants to be kind. He and his wife had a plan of really spoiling their children and giving their children a wonderful life. And because they never had kids, it's like the emergence of Jesper with this quest to deliver mail, and the only people who he could trick into giving mail was kids. But this whole quest ends up reigniting that desire to give toys to kids. It just ends up like, okay, they're not my kids, but they're someone's kids. Someone's kids out there need something wonderful in this very weary, dreary, sad world, and I'm gonna give it to them. And all the toys are really wonderful. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. Uh, but then again, another favorite Jesper moment is one kid gets angry and he's about to like beat up Jesper. He's like, "Hey, all I got when I sent mail was coal. That means you told." And then Jesper's like, "Well, uh, the Santa guy or the magical guy only knows when you're being naughty." So he knew, and he's like, "No, you had to have told him I was naughty." And thus begins the legend of Santa Claus keeping a list and having an all-knowing knowledge of whether you're good or bad, and then that spreads across the kids like wildfire. It's beautiful. I really love how this story is constructed. That a selfish desire leads to kind of a selfless act. And even by story's end, Klaus has his opportunity to leave, but it doesn't make him happy anymore. He, by all the deeds that Jesper and Klaus do, that ends up leading to them actually making a sleigh led by reindeer, the only thing strong enough to haul a bag of toys across town. That all these things he had done, and once it's exposed to everyone that he was only doing it to get out, all these things that he had done, including they ended up changing the school. The school became a real school again. There was no more fish. It's just all these things that he had done had actual value to him, and he wanted to keep doing the right thing. Which, getting exposed, everyone's mad at him because they realize, oh, you started this whole thing just so you could send mail so that you could leave. It makes everyone hate him, but leads to another favorite Jesper moment, which is the original families of these clans who started this war have teamed up in order to take down the Santa Claus and destroy the presents. And so Jesper arrives. He, on his way almost out, he sees them going up, and they have fire and pitchforks, and it's clear they're headed toward Klaus and company. So Jesper gets there just in time, and manages to get the bag of presents onto the sleigh, and giddy up reindeer, but the reindeer are not attached to the sleigh, and so because the giant bag of presents just drags the sleigh backward and begins this huge epic chase sequence. But it's just such a funny moment of Jesper going, "I would not have done that if I knew that this was not attached to the reindeer. I'm so sorry." But because he comes back, he redeems himself. It's a really nice story of redemption. I think, there's a saying that people don't change, but I have seen personally that people do change, and a lot of people change actually. They change in ways. I think certain characteristics never leave, but there are people who change. I know this is going to be a bit personal. My father, in his younger days, was a drinker, and when he drank, he would get very disgusting and vile. Those were some very, very hard times as a kid when he would drink. And we also later discovered he had bipolar disorder, so that was a part of it. So we had a lot of learning. My family had a lot of learning how to sort of deal with that, and how do you deal with and live with someone who's kind of mentally unstable. But watching him over the years, like, he stopped drinking, and I've talked before about my mom getting cancer, and when that happened, that was a huge thing that really made him slow down all of his bad habits. And although he's always been a man with a temper, he tempered himself to such a degree that now he's like the world's greatest grandpa. And it's an unbelievable change that took years, and it took love and forgiveness of the father and patience. People go through changes all the time, and that, to me, that was a huge miracle. That's a Christmas miracle, to over the years watch my dad become a truly warm, loving person who was not plagued by his mental illness. But it took years of transformation, and faith. And my mom always had faith in him, even though my mom really took the brunt, the worst of the hits of all this behavior. She always had faith in him and believed in him. And that really rubbed off on me. I thought, well, if my mom really believes, and this is a situation where I think, probably 80 to 90% of people in this type of situation with a rough around guy as a husband or father to their kids, probably 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, I would think. Anyway, the figure is probably not in favor of that person, the wife, or the kids. But this is that one case where, my mother's conviction totally won. And that's something I'm grateful for and pray and I'm grateful for every day. But that to me is proof that miracles can come true, that conviction can be rewarded. Not talking about conviction, but conviction. If you truly believe in something, that it can be rewarded. And so, and that's what I celebrate on this podcast, is the conviction of strong, talented filmmakers who know how to tell stories. I want, if you're a young filmmaker or even an audience member who just wants to appreciate movies, I want you to, this is my perspective on movies, where I'm coming from, why I enjoy them. To me, watching the town go from this violent, desolate place to a wonderful, warm place is the same thing as watching my parents go from parents to grandparents. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, it's like, not that my house growing up was truly desolate, but it would have its ups and downs, and to see more ups than downs, and to really see a warm and wonderful fuzzy side to someone I grew up afraid of. That's wonderful. You know what I mean? It's proof to me that anyone can change, and it's proof to me that miracles absolutely exist. And so that's why Klaus means a lot to me. It's when we have Klaus, he has the sad story of wanting kids with his wife, and his wife passes away, and it turns him into this rock solid, scary loner person. But just one picture of a kid being sad, and it's a drawing, breaks that solitary attitude, and it gives him the desire to be that warm person he used to be. I think people don't just change, but they kind of go through cycles, and maybe not everyone changes, and I think you see the consequence of people not changing all the time. But if you can change, and if you can become good, the reward for doing the right thing, and the reward for an act of kindness, is truly seeing the person you're kind to spread that kindness and that care to someone else. You know what I mean? So seeing my mom's forgiveness and being a forgiving person myself, I feel like I'm getting to watch my dad take that love and give it to his grandson, who is now, my nephew is like, all he wants to do is hang out with grandpa. I'm like, grandpa. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, this is wonderful. You know what I mean? This is a beautiful thing. So to see this movie go so far out of its way to tell its story, but the story has a meaning, and not only that, every story is wrapped around that meaning. You know what I mean? And whether it was the The Klaus who wanted to be a dad and didn't get it, or Jesper who was absolutely selfish and only wants things for himself, and even in the quest to be the most selfish person, discovers, oh, there's something else here too. Being there for other people really does matter. And so he supersedes just being a good postman and abandons being a selfish commercialist man and becomes a good man. And it's amazing how the movie doesn't waste an overwhelming amount of time for his character to meet Rashida Jones and for them to have a romance. Their romance happens very naturally over the course of a couple scenes, and it's really nicely done to where the movie's not about the romance. It is about Jesper and Klaus growing into what they truly are meant to do with their lives, which is spread joy to these kids and give them toys, for Christmas. And but how we get there is watching them evolve, and how each person pushes the other in the direction of being the best version of themselves. So I think the story construction, if you really want to learn how a movie is done right, you got to look at this script and how each element evolves the next element. And the beautiful thing is, so much is actually unspoken. Like Sergio Pablos and company and the writers do a wonderful job of making sure that there's never a distinguished line where Jesper says, oh, I've realized I don't like being selfish. But when he gets what he wants and the 6,000 mails have been sent and his father arrives and is proud of him, you see the look on his face of, oh, I have to leave? I don't want to leave, but he just says it with his face. He doesn't actually say the words. And it's actually, the father is kind of pushed, or the father recognizes the look on his son's face. It's like, you're not happy? I thought this is what you wanted. And then the very next scene, people have come to sort of convince Jesper not to leave, and Jesper's already not left. He made the explanation off screen. We don't actually need to see that explanation. This movie does a great job of showing, not telling, but also when it tells you something, only tells you exactly what you need to feel the story. See, feeling is the key. Emotion, most people are emotional. And look, I've been driving for over 10 years now, and I can tell you, all the bad drivers drive with emotion. The smart drivers drive with their senses, with their thoughts, with logic. The understanding that I need to drive safely, not just so that I get home safely, but so the people around me get home safely. But the emotional drivers are the ones getting in horrific accidents all the time because their emotions rule them. They are ruled by whatever pushed them out of bed or pushed them earlier in the day. And I do my very best not to be an emotional driver, always to be a logical driver. If I'm too tired, pull the fuck over and take a nap. You know what I mean? Do not put other people at risk. But people are emotional beings nonetheless, no matter how logical you may be, as much as you may try. And so the proper way to tell a story is first to have a reason for that story, to teach people about kindness and how it comes about and its function in society. But also, when you're telling a story, it's, well, how do those people go through the changes to make them realize that kindness is important both to them personally, but also to society. And the way you get there is by having a set of circumstances that are just extreme enough to fit your story space, which is, I want to do a movie So whatever's happening, it's got to be dramatic enough and emotional enough to fill a movie, but it can't be so much that it's you basically have a television show. You know what I mean? If Jesper has a speech every 5 minutes, that's a TV show. Go make a TV show. But no, everything about Jesper is established in the first part of the movie. He's a selfish person who doesn't care about the rules. And it's that behavior is continued when he starts hustling children. Hey, you want some toys? Fucking creepy. Excuse my language. But very, very creepy, right? But it all comes to a head when he realizes, and it's just something that comes out of him when he's trying to convince Klaus. It just comes out of him, and you see it in the performance of the animation and the performance of the voice. But the animation, the visual part of it, conveys so well that it happens to Jesper internally that he really enjoys doing this. You know, he just kind of, he keeps marking his male progress, but at the same time, he has an unspoken love for delivering these presents, and eventually they start giving him cookies and all that stuff. But his love for what he's doing is unspoken. It's visual. So again, this is a visual medium. But just, I want you to think about how I just described that. There's a reason this show, for the most part, does not use clips. Number one, takes too much time to edit. I don't have that time. But number two, even though I'm saying visual, meaning for the eyes, right? I should be able to describe it to you. You should be able to just listen to me describe something. And if I describe it and you can see it in your own mind, that's visual storytelling. You know what I mean? When I say to you that this picture of a house with a sad boy in it made a cold loner woodsman decide to bring a toy to that boy, you see that in your head. You know, the description itself is visual. That's what a script is supposed to be. That's what good storytelling should be. Is that, you know, a loner becomes a good man or becomes a part of society in order to better society because he feels bad for a child who is suffering in society. And the same with Jesper. He's also a loner. He's out for him, but he's selfishly a loner. He's out for himself. But even Jesper, just watching sad kids become happy kids, watching children at war with each other become children who are friends with each other and get along, that affects him so deeply to the core that something was missing in his life that he didn't know what it was until all of a sudden he was making choices that were making people genuinely happy. Not just making his father proud or impressing an instructor or something like that, but making people genuinely happy made him genuinely happy. And this is told visually. This is the most important part of storytelling in the film medium. But also when you're just telling a story, you should be able to get these cues easily or comfortably in some kind of way that if you were blind and you described it to a person, they'd go, oh yes, I understand what's going on, man. You know, things can't be so convoluted that by the time you're done explaining it, no one cares, although that's what my podcast is. But as a piece of storytelling, that's what Klaus is. Klaus gets us through these stories, the story of the loner who's selfish, the story of the loner who lost everything. It gets us through their journeys to wrap around a very specific point, which is a genuine act of kindness inspires another. So, you know, there's a lot to unpack with this movie. I just wanted to celebrate some of my favorite moments and just the quality of the storytelling. I really believe that this is what was that podcast called? Because I'm going to quote them right now. As the host of Double Toasted said, this movie is an instant classic. It came out in 2019. This is 2024. It's been 5 years. I love this movie. It's a really wonderful movie. And I'm telling you, if you're a young storyteller or an experienced storyteller, this is a great movie to watch in order to flesh out what is storytelling, what's required for the audience to get what's going on and to be emotionally invested, and and uh, and most importantly, you got to wrap your stories around your theme. Your theme is the why. I've mentioned this before, but when I was studying to be a filmmaker in high school, I was part of this paid program for high school students where essentially the Bay Area Video Coalition, which is based in San Francisco, they pay students to learn how to make videos, and it was an excellent program for me to go through. One of the first things they taught about in the orientation, they give us this list of things that a filmmaker is supposed to think about when they're making movies, and it's not what you might think. What it was is the story, the meaning behind the story, the flow of the story, the style of the story. There's this huge list. It was actually like 10 items long. I've essentially condensed it for myself in my other podcast, Final Cut. I've condensed it for myself to story, meaning, and flow. The three essentials to telling a story properly. Those three things have to be acting in tangent with each other in order to, in my eyes, produce a successful product. Meaning that, but meaning is what the rest wrap themselves around, or each one plays a part. You know, once you get to editing the thing, that's when you realize how much each part is needed to tell the story properly. It's not really a pyramid so much as a guidance matrix. Where how much of a story can you say the meaning or express the meaning? Because if you express the meaning too much, it now no longer has meaning. Now we're just blatantly thinking about the theme of the movie, and we're not actually thinking about the story. So the best way to tell the story and to get your meaning across is make people feel the story, the emotion of the character and the character's journey. If we feel their journey and see how there are earmarks for when the meaning has a point to them, those earmarks are the point of the meaning. But also the movie has to have a flow. It has to be edited well. Shots have to lead from one to the next. You know what I mean? Everything has to move in a fluid way in order to get the audience to experience the story in the best way possible. So faster, more intense, faster, more intense. Disney Plus could use this a lot when it comes to Star Wars. And the reasons, you know, it may sound like a dumb direction to the layman, but faster, more intense. You think about that. Think about that in movies. How many movies lose you because they're boring? How many movies lose you because people talk too much? Consider the difference between Craven, I just saw Craven, and The Godfather. There's a lot of talking in Craven, but all they're doing is getting plot points across and shoving character motivation. It's very shoved, it's very forced, it's a lot of rambling. None of it really makes the story work. But if you look at The Godfather, it starts off with a speech of a man who's asking for help from the Godfather. And the speech starts off with, "I believe in America. I believe this is a place where we can make things happen and we can be whatever we want to be. But my dream was destroyed when men attacked my daughter and hurt her and beat her. And I would like you to kill those men." And the Godfather, and you know, this is a long speech, but it's full of emotion. It's telling a story. And the Godfather's response is both part of the Godfather's emotional perspective. I cannot kill these men because they did not kill your daughter. But I promise, if you agree to owe me a favor that I will come to when it's time, I promise that those men will get fair treatment for what they've done to your daughter. You know, the theme of the movie crops up in this very first speech, where essentially the Godfather establishes, I am not necessarily a good man, but I do draw the line when I don't feel things are right. So you're asking me to kill someone who did not kill one of your people. That's not justice to me, and I will not do that. I will do unto them as they've done to your daughter. So the Godfather does believe in eye for an eye, but he also firmly believes in drawing the line, right? So that's why that scene is engaging, and watching Craven talk to anyone in Craven is just mind-numbing and makes you want to claw your ears and eyes out, because the blatant, it feels literally like script notes. They didn't even have a script, but they had the notes for what was supposed to go into the script, and so they're saying the lines that are supposed to hit those notes. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I killed the man who killed your friend. That means we're friends. And by the way, I could use your help with finding more people to kill. It's like there's no tact, there's no character. It's literally plot points and what needs to come across in the scene. There's nothing actually being said. There's no character. We don't know exactly what the morality of this character is, even though he's saying I'm a good person. He's also saying I'm not a good person, and it's such a muddled mix of things that you know are being said to keep the movie moving, and not an engaging scene between two characters. So Klaus does the wonderful job of actually not having speeches, but every single line of dialogue, it's there for an emotional reason, and that emotional storytelling gets the theme across. So it's important to understand and appreciate these things. And that's why I wanted to talk about Klaus, because it accomplishes so much with a lot, actually. But, you know, with visual storytelling. It's a masterclass in visual storytelling and the exact right amount of dialogue needed for the story that you're trying to tell. The Godfather is a movie that depends on its dialogue. It's not a TV show, but it's about perspectives and how those perspectives clash with each other. Even in a later scene in The Godfather, there's a scene where the Godfather's talking to another head of a family, and his eldest son, Santino, bursts out saying, hey, we shouldn't do this, because this and this and this. And the Godfather looks at him and tells him, you need to stop talking right now. And later on, the Godfather explains to his son, never ever tell what you really think outside of this family. And he says that because essentially he's exposed the weakness. He's exposed that his son is volatile and can be pushed at any point by anyone if they say the wrong thing. Whereas the Godfather maintains his control by always holding his cards to his chest, but also always being very clear and honest about what he wants. Whereas Santino is so emotional and reactive, he cannot be trusted to hold his own if things go awry, which is an exposed weakness for this family. If someone takes out the Godfather, there's no one beneath him who has the control and capacity to maintain that family, except Michael, who later takes over. So anyway, Godfather talk aside, Klaus is a top-notch movie. I do think, like Godfather, it's a classic, and unlike Godfather, it does everything with visuals and not dialogue. Oh, I mean, the dialogue is there, but it's not there to define the movie. The movie is truly defined by its visual style. Like I said, it has a storybook style, beautiful lighting. I don't think I've been this touched by the lighting of a 2D animated movie since The Prince of Egypt. The Prince of Egypt is one of my favorite animated films, but really one of my favorite films of all time. But that movie had exceptional lighting and exceptional look. And I haven't felt this dramatically affected by an animated picture since that movie. Um, Certainly not 2D, you know what I mean? I mean, Tarzan was pretty good, but it's no Prince of Egypt. But here is where I just feel like this is what the director was talking about in his interview. It was like, what makes Prince of Egypt so wonderful is that it's a merging of old techniques with new techniques to tell the story that they want to tell about Moses being the Prince of Egypt and the responsibility that falls upon him to free the slaves. And there's another movie I can go into about how well the story, whether it's accurate to the Bible or not, you know, there's total inaccuracies, but, you know, the point of the story is still the same, but it's told under a modern context that kids can watch. So, where I think, in the case of Prince of Egypt, that is pretty raw. The violence in that movie is pretty scary. It's a scary movie even for kids. But I would say to that end, there's a magical, heartwarming equivalent to Prince of Egypt, where Prince of Egypt really does try to do everything it can to be a biblical story that's accessible to children. This movie does a wonderful job of being an origin for Santa Claus that's acceptable for people who live in the real world and feel that magic isn't real. And the movie does a wonderful job of giving little touchstones of what magic does exist. And however subtle it may be, it's there. And when the magic appears in this movie, the one thing I'm not talking about in the spoiler section, but when the magic appears in this movie, it has such incredible meaning, and it always appears whenever a character has genuine heart and soul to share with other people. And that is what I wanted to celebrate about Klaus. So hats off to the cast and crew of Klaus. Another wonderful thing that was in one of the interviews, I'll have the link in the description below. Rashida Jones playing the teacher. I forgot the teacher's name at the moment. There's a cool little shout out the director gave to her. He was talking about when he cast her, she's also a writer, not just an actress. And she actually had some disagreements with him about things that her character would say. And he had the wisdom to hear her out and listen to her. And she essentially kind of rewrote what her character would say. I don't know what the scene was. He didn't mention what the scene was. But the fact of filmmaking is that it's a collaborative medium, right? So he allowed, and by his own words, he allowed Rashida Jones to school him on what the character should be and how it should be said. But that all really helped accumulate. The movie feels flawless. The movie feels perfect. It's not like I can point to you a scene with the teacher and go, oh, you see, this scene kind of stands out. It sounds kind of weird. It's not really consistent. No, everything in the movie really flows perfectly. The movie is perfect storytelling, perfect flow, perfect meaning. Very few movies get that much respect from me in that regard, and this movie totally hit all the high marks it needed to hit. I was very impressed with the technical achievements as well as the storytelling achievements. I really feel like, you know, filmmakers, everyone should watch this movie, but if you're a filmmaker, you should be studying this movie and trying to figure out how the bread was made, because it's going to make you a better storyteller down the line. So that's what I got to say on Klaus. You know, I'm impressed with this movie. I love this movie. I'm so grateful for the amazing Z to recommend it to me. So thank you very much for watching if you made it this far. And please do let me know in the comments if you've seen the movie. What are your favorite moments? What do you have a favorite Klaus moment? Do you have a favorite Jesper moment? Do you have a favorite Rashida Jones moment? I love all of her scenes. Okay, I do have a little bit more to say. The Rashida Jones character being the teacher who, when we meet her inside of a school, it's not a school anymore. It's now a butcher shop for fish. You know, if anything represents the town, it's her character. If it, because she meets the Klaus and Jesper in the middle, where she's from somewhere else, just like Jesper. But like Klaus, she's been here long enough to see how rotten the town is. And when we meet her, it's supposed to be a school, but it looks horrendous. You see the fish everywhere. It looks gross and disgusting. You can smell it. You know, it's so effectively done through animation. You could smell it. And you see how her hair is wild and crazy. She doesn't really care anymore. She's literally flipping around fish, saying, "Hey, you get out of my shop. I'm tired of talking to you, mailman." You know what I mean? And then as the town changes, you see less fish. As kids go, "Oh, I'm supposed to write a letter? I don't know how to write." And then Jesper goes, "Well, there is a school." You know what I mean? So even though it all services his commercialist, selfish ideals, sending kids to school improves the school. And and it's a motivation to learn for the kids. They want to learn because they want to write letters, but they discover the wonder of learning, that learning can be a wonderful, beautiful thing if you really are motivated to do it. And it can benefit you in more than just toys, but how your entire town can get better because you've learned something and you've brought something back to that town. But that's all expressed through the Rashida. As we see the school become a school, the beautiful thing, talk about visual storytelling. When we first see the school covered in fish, doesn't even look like a school. It looks like a butcher shop. When we see the school at the end, it is a fully fleshed out school. There's no fish anymore. There's all the utensils and the desks, and it looks proper and it looks clean. And even Rashida Jones's character is she's dressed nicely and her hair is done, not like done, but just she's tied up. She looks nice. She looks presentable. She's no longer crazy and angry anymore because she wanted to be a teacher. She didn't want to be a fisherman, and now she gets to have her dream because of everything that's happened in the movie. So there's nothing that's the key element to this movie that shows you how the town has changed. Rashida Jones is the sort of fulcrum character who meets everything in the middle. Jesper's stranger in a new town element, and also Klaus's been here, done that element, and also what the town is, that warring nature, that she is ready to bite this guy's head off as soon as he shows up because she's so sick of being in this town. And Jesper is no mage with the words, let's just say that. But yeah, so that's an example of how the writing and directing, the visual storytelling, and again, clearly Rashida Jones had really key things to say that improved the storytelling of her character. So and the director knew how to take that and make sure, hey, this fits in the movie. This is the right thing for the movie, and everything tells the story. So when seeing the school, that's our meter for how the town has changed. Even though we do see the town change over the course of the movie, the school is the example of it's our measuring stick for the change of the whole town, because it's the one familiar location we come back to. And this is something as a writer and a director you have to think about. You have to think about not only for production cost, but you have to think about there's got to be familiar locations that we come back to throughout the story, that every time we're there, it tells where the story is or where it's going. That, like I said, the school starting out covered in fish and looking like a butcher shop, that is what the town is. You know what I mean? It's a synecdoche. It's a small symbol that represents the entire thing. So again, hats off. I'm done talking about Klaus now. I hope you watch it, enjoy it, and again, please tell me your favorite scene in the comments. And tell me if you watched this because of this review. Let me know. That'd be cool to know. What's that great meme? The movie watching girl posts that smile whenever I recommend a movie and someone watches it and enjoys it. You know what I mean? Anyway, so thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Merry Christmas.